Well, good evening. My name is Jody Cooper. I'm serving as interim president this year. And on behalf of Chadron State College, I'd like to welcome you all to the campus this evening. We are thrilled to be able to host the Pilster Great Plains Lecture Series this evening. And what I would like to do, I'm not going to take more of my time, but I'd like to introduce Ms. Shannon Smith, who is the president of the Mari Sandoz Society, for some remarks before we move on to our guest speaker.
Okay, we all knew this was going to happen, didn't we? So you folks are going to have to look beyond the podium. So thank you very much, Dr. Cooper. And we're really excited to be here and happy with the administration of Chadron State College. All of you students know we have the Mari Sandoz Center over there, right? And it's been there for 25 years, and we've had a good relationship with Chadron State for almost 30 years to make sure that your college is the host of some of the most important research and knowledge about Western Nebraska. And so I think you should be really proud and excited. And as a board that I represent, we are very proud and excited to work with our interim president Cooper and with Vice President Kimberly Paddock O'Reilly and with Dean Jim Margetts. And we have on our board several members of your faculty, and their job is to make sure that we are doing things to promote and protect the legacy of Mari Sandoz and the history of this region. And it's really important. So I want to say thank you for introducing me, and thank you for helping us be successful in this project. So I want to just say a few words about our society. In the spirit of Mari Sandoz, the vision of the Mari Sandoz Society is to amplify the voices of the dispossessed and challenge the romanticized view of the West through education, publication, and outreach. That's what Mari Sandoz would have wanted of all of us here. To do that, our board has adopted in the last year what we are calling our guiding principle. And that is, Mari Sandoz advocated for Native peoples throughout her life. And in keeping with that spirit, the society commits itself to devote a substantial portion of its resources to prioritize Indigenous perspectives in our projects and our programs. Sandoz wrote extensively about Indigenous dispossession. We likewise feel a duty to acknowledge this history and to work towards reconciliation and healing. Folks, we live in the heart of a region that can demonstrate this, and I'm really proud to be part of this group and part of what the college and all of us can do together. So at this time, I want to say that we are very proud and honored to offer the Sandoz Society's support on behalf of all of the people who live here in this region and even throughout our country to the Northern Cheyenne Journey Home Committee as they work to help tribal members and non-Indians heal from a traumatic event in our region's collective history. The moving and inspirational story you are about to hear from this wise, kind, and humble man, our dear friend Gerry Robinson, will help us all understand and honor the efforts and resilience of the Northern Cheyenne people. At this moment, I would like to ask, they don't know I'm going to do this, but I would like to ask our friends from the Northern Cheyenne Journey Home Committee to please stand up. A few of them have stayed after a week-long of meetings here in this region. So may I ask you, Vincent White Crane, to please stand up? Major Robinson, may I ask you to please stand up? And then, of course, our darling Gerry and his wife, Connie. These are people that are working so hard to help this region present a very important part of our history and a very emotional, as you can hear me, a very emotional, important story that we should all know. And so I'm very excited, and I thank you, and I extend my society's honors and gratitude for your partnership and for the work you are doing in this region. Thank you. Mari would be very proud of what we're doing here today. This is exactly what she was hoping for. Since her death in 1966, people have been drawn to Western Nebraska to learn more about her life and her work. A devoted group of people at Chadron State eventually formalized and in 1973 founded the Mari Sandoz Heritage Society. Now, over 50 years later, we partner with Chadron State to maintain the Mari Sandoz High Plains Heritage Center here on campus, and we host events like this to help remind people of the importance of our region and the importance of her legacy and the legacy of the land upon which we live. We also partner with the University of Nebraska in both Lincoln and Kearney. She left behind her a treasure of materials that people don't even know about. This woman kept copies of her letters that she typed since 1926 until she died in 1946. We have 8,000 letters, thousands and thousands of pages. And this material has not been effectively cataloged and made available for scholars. This is just now happening. Folks, we're going to learn about our region because of the work that the Mari Sandoz Society is doing. And lastly, we partner with Western Colorado University. Mari was very engaged with the state of Colorado. They host the Mari Sandoz Writers Festival. They host major writers from around the nation, and they bring people to help respect the writing about nature, the environment, and the West that Mari was so devoted to. To do this, we're governed by a board of directors from around the region and around the nation. I would like to introduce to you the members and board members of the Sandoz and the staff, Elizabeth Chase, who's in the back of the room. I would like to ask my board members to please stand up so that you can all recognize them, and please don't hesitate to speak with them. Thank you. I encourage you all to talk with any of us. We have a Sandoz Country tour that we're developing. We have so many exciting projects, and we really want to emphasize we are devoted and committed to Chadron State College. Our center is going to become something to behold over the next decade, and I want you all to be aware that we are staying here and going to put on exhibits that emphasize the story of the Cheyenne and the Lakota and the homesteaders who came to this region. And so now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Kurt Kimbacher, Professor of History here at Chadron State College, who will be your MC through this talk. And thank you all very much for coming. We're delighted to have you here.
I'm buying her a box. Hey, thank you all for coming. It's good to see you here. It's really my privilege to introduce Gerry Robinson. I've known him for a number of years. We were trying to figure out just when, but I got a call one day from Courtney Kuba, who was over at the Sandoz Center as the archivist, that there's a person researching down here you might like to meet. And she was so right. In addition to just being good company, it turns out that he, in the spirit of Mari Sandoz, is a writer's writer and a historian's historian. The breadth of the work he's just able to accomplish, he writes academic history, he writes poetry, he writes journal, encyclopedia articles for Wyoming or some history thing. You write really good articles, mostly about, exclusively as far as I know, about indigenous issues, Northern Cheyenne issues, and just their absence in the historical record. Also, much like Sandoz, he writes with great detail, with authority, with elegance, and certainly with grace, especially when it gets, I think the going gets tough sometimes. So I just want to plug one more thing. Oh, and the other thing I want to say about him that I just learned today, he's also becoming an archaeologist. So it's, kind of a Renaissance man. But Cheyenne Story, an interpretation of courage, is available for sale in the back. I think it really expresses his voice about his relatives were negotiating war and peace with the United States back in the 1870s. The first part of a trilogy, and he brings us a lot. So without further ado, tonight's talk is the Northern Cheyenne Homecoming, renaming, regaining, and reframing history, something in that order. Please welcome me, Gerry Robinson.
I on? You here? Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Awesome introduction. I'm a little overwhelmed right now. This is quite a turnout. I was in the room earlier this afternoon and I counted 100 chairs. And I said, oh, they aren't going to be filled up at all. And to see this crowd here today it really is overwhelming. My heart's very full right now. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your interest in the history of my ancestors. I hope to do them credit tonight. I'll do my best. I'd like to thank all my friends on the Sandoz board. I've had the opportunity to meet so many of you, and I got to meet some new ones this evening. I look forward to continuing our relationship. I know that most certainly we will as we continue on with the Northern Cheyenne Healing Trail and other good work that we're doing. And a thank you to Chadron State College for hosting the event, and Amanda for all of your tech savvy and getting this thing in my ear just right. So without too much more ado, I'll get into the presentation. I've been asked a few times tonight, when's the second book coming out? It seems to be actually an ongoing conversation with many people, and my pat answer is, well, I'm researching it as we speak, and what I'm going to share with you tonight is some really good research, but also the reason why the second book isn't quite done yet. I got a little sidetracked with some very important work in the research, and everything that Shannon said about what Mari Sandoz hoped would happen down the line is in fact happening, and I hope by the end of this evening that you'll be able to see that and appreciate it. So I'm going to finish my wiring process here. I came in a little early to get set up, but I found so many friends and started so many conversations that I didn't quite get everything done that I'd hoped to, and I think I'm on now. So the Pilster Award, or Pilster Endowment, I did a little research on it and found that it was created to honor the courage and tenacity of the people of the plains. And if you've read Cheyenne Autumn by Mari Sandoz, you know that my people, the Northern Cheyenne, are exactly that. In fact, they are the very epitome of courage and tenacity. It's my privilege to share a bit of their story with you tonight and to tell you about a pair of exciting projects that are currently underway that strive to present the Northern Cheyenne story from the Northern Cheyenne perspective. And to tell you those stories, I'd like to invite you on a couple trails that we call homecoming and healing. I'll share a very short history first to set the stage. One thing I want to point out right off the bat, if you look at this map, I'll be using this map throughout the presentation. And if you look close, you can see that it's a map of the Great Plains. You can see the state lines in there and all of the rivers. But if you look very close, you'll notice that the rivers have some unfamiliar names. And these are the names that the Northern Cheyenne used to call these rivers. I took this map from my first book, and I feel If I'm going to be telling the Cheyenne story, I should be telling it in their world and use their language as best I can. And so the rivers that you see there, well, you'll all see the Platte right off the bat if you just look for the way it flows, but the North Platte is called the Moonshell River, and the South Platte is called the Fat River, and then on down through you can see all the other names. This is part of, at least in this, when I'm in storytelling mode, that this is how I try to refer to the land that my ancestors knew. And so in the spring of 1877, the Northern Cheyenne tribe split into two groups. This was after an attack on their main winter camp in the Bighorn Mountains in 1876. The following spring, they decided to go into the agencies, and they split into two groups. Over 300 Northern Cheyenne surrendered at what would eventually become Fort Keogh in what is now Miles City, Montana. It's on the Elk River, Yellowstone River is what it's known by today. The largest portion of the tribe, nearly 1,000 members, went into the Red Cloud Agency, which they considered to be their home according to the terms of the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty. And those at Red Cloud were immediately pressured by the U.S. government to move south to Indian Territory to live with their relatives, the Southern Cheyenne. The negotiating officers made many assurances that the Southern Agency offered better rations, better hunting, better farming, but the Northern Cheyenne people were very reluctant to leave their homeland. And when they balked, the officers then promised them that if they went down there for 1 year and they still didn't like it, they could come back north. And to everyone's surprise, a man named Standing Elk, who had been selected by the chiefs to speak for the people, agreed that they would all go down to the Darlington Agency in Indian Territory. The rest of the leaders, and really the rest of the people, were all very surprised that he agreed to go, and they were very reluctant, but they finally all decided to, okay, we'll go down and do the 1 year trial, basically. And so they traveled south to the Darlington Agency. This is a sketch of what the Darlington Agency looked like in 1878. This comes from the files of the Oklahoma State Historical Society. And after a period of settling in there, it quickly became apparent that the Southern Agency did not suit many of the Northern people. The better rations they had been promised were actually fewer and of poorer quality. The buffalo had all been but hunted out, and there were no implements for farming implements for those who wanted to try to farm. The worst challenge they faced, however, was an epidemic of measles and malaria. These two diseases that the Northern Cheyenne had never been exposed to and therefore had no immunity to. And in the one agency doctor that was assigned to care for thousands of Northern Cheyenne, Southern Cheyenne, and Arapaho quickly ran out of quinine and other medications, and soon after, children, elders, and even healthy adults began dying of both disease and starvation. And despite the repeated requests of Chiefs Little Wolf and Morning Star and other leaders, the agent, John D. Miles, refused to permit them to leave. After spending 13, and I'll back up here just real quick. I want to make a point about Morning Star. I use the name Morning Star. History knows him as Dull Knife. And there may be several people in the audience that know him better by the name Dull Knife. Dull Knife was a Lakota name given to him by his brother-in-laws in a joking fashion, as brother-in-laws often do, about not having a knife sharp enough to hunt with. His Cheyenne name was Morning Star, and that was what he was known to the Northern Cheyenne people by, and that's how I refer to him when I tell his story, out of respect. So they approached John Miles, and he refused to let them go north. He stated that he knew nothing of the agreement and that they should simply just try to get along and settle in. And after spending 13 months, 1 year and 1 month at the Darlington Agency, over 50 of their number had died. And Little Wolf finally approached Miles and informed him that he was done asking, that they were going to leave. And he asked that if he was going to send soldiers after them, that they would let them get a little ways away from the agency, and they could make blood on the ground at that point so that the people who remained at the agency wouldn't have to walk on bloody ground where their relatives were killed. So, again, he said they were done asking and that they were simply going to leave. On the night of September 9th, under the leadership of Little Wolf and Morning Star, the people left their lodges standing and their lodge fires burning, and they just walked off into the night. They traveled 6 miles upstream on the North Fork of the Canadian River, where they came to a herd of about 400 horses that Little Wolf had had the young men in the band for the last couple of months collecting horses, guns, supplies in preparation for this journey north. Once they were mounted, the people all headed north. There had been 2 companies of soldiers assigned to watch over them to make sure that they didn't leave. And so when I say they left their lodges standing, they left the lodge skins on. They basically took whatever they could carry on their backs and walked off. So the soldiers saw the camp as it should be, with the lodge fires burning, the lodge is still standing, and they didn't realize that the Cheyenne had left until they got notification from the agent early the next morning. This image shows the route that the Northern Cheyenne took home. In 2022, the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council recognized this trail as the Northern Cheyenne Homecoming Trail. It's been previously called by other names like the Northern Cheyenne Exodus Trail or the Cheyenne Odyssey or even Dull Knife's Raid. This name change is significant because as well-meaning as those Greek and biblical names are, they do not adequately describe this Northern Cheyenne experience. Though it might sound a little nitpicky, even the name Dull Knife, as I said, was a Lakota name. And it certainly wasn't a raid. What these people were trying to do was go home. So here's something that you might find interesting. I'd wager that most of you had no idea that at one time this trail was going to be called the Cheyenne Autumn Trail. This was a promotional shot that was taken during the festivities around the premiere in Cheyenne, Wyoming, of the movie that was based on Mari's book. You can see there the couple actors in the movie, Jimmy Stewart, Carol Baker. There's the governor, Cliff Hansen of Wyoming, and the man wearing the headdress is John Woodenlegs, a past president of the Northern Cheyenne tribe. The name was even recognized by the Secretary of the Interior at that time, Stuart Udall, at that event. But there's been no official declaration made. I've dug as deep as I can go to try to find something in the official government record to indicate that this would be known moving forward as the Cheyenne Autumn Trail. And I've been up and down the trail several times, and I can tell you that I have never come across any remnants or any indication that the sign was ever installed. So what I've surmised was that it is likely just another case of outside entities calling attention to themselves by talking about their big plans to help Indian country and not following through. We all know that Mari hated the movie, and I can't help but suspect she probably may have felt the same about all the hoopla around calling the trail by this name. Whatever it's called, this trail was a trail of conflict. There were 7 major altercations that took place along it. 5 were started by the military, and 1 occurred when the young men of the Northern Cheyenne attacked settlers in northwest Kansas. The last at Fort Robinson, and I just want to get this out of the way. My name is Gerry Robinson. I have no relation to Lieutenant Levi Robinson, who the fort is named after. I asked my older sister, Vonda, one time if we were related, and I still have a bruise behind my ear. She made it clear that we are not. So the altercation at Fort Robinson has been called both a battle by some and a massacre by others. We feel that it was a much more complex event and than what either of those names describe, and I'll discuss that more in a bit here. These 3 sites in the center of the trail all have monuments on site and all have regular events to commemorate what happened with regard to the trail. I'll get back to them in a bit. On the other hand, the locations, all the sites on the southern portion of the trail have been forgotten over time. Many authors have written about them, but none have actually visited them. I wasn't aware of this until I began looking for them myself. Being a Northern Cheyenne, excuse me, I felt it was important to at least make an effort to try to find them. I started with Turkey Springs, the Turkey Springs battlefield. This is the first battle that took place along the trail back home. And, okay, yeah, that's it in the orange, the larger star at the bottom there. If you travel to the town of Freedom in Woods County, Oklahoma, and ask for help finding Turkey Springs, as I did, you'll be taken to this site, this developed spring, appropriately called Turkey Springs. It's on Anderson Creek, just northeast of Freedom. It's Highway 64 crosses Anderson Creek, and in 1978, the centennial celebration of the Battle of Turkey Springs, the Oklahoma Historical Society placed this marker to indicate where the Battle of Turkey Springs took place, which was very considerate, but completely wrong. The research that was done to verify it was quite incomplete. When I visited the site, I noticed the terrain there just doesn't match with any of the historical record. The military wrote a lot of reports, gave a lot of testimony about the events at Turkey Springs and all of the other battles that took place on up the trail. And when you read those reports, they describe different geographic elements that were involved in the battle, and none of those showed up at this site. And but that doesn't stop somebody from writing about it. And what I found is that a lot of the authors actually changed the story. If you read certain authors, they changed the story to match this landscape and took it away from the actual descriptions of what the soldiers wrote about the event. On my second visit to the site, I had with me Dr. Richard Littlebear, who was then the president of Chief Dull Knife College from our reservation. Also on that trip, we had the good fortune of meeting Dr. Kay Decker, a professor at Northwestern Oklahoma State University, who had been searching for the actual battle site herself for over 20 years. She also was not convinced that this was the site. So she and I began collaborating and sharing our research with each other, which ultimately led us 7 miles east over the next 4 years. And during our work together, it became clear that this map would play a big role in helping us find the site. What it is a map that was drawn by a Captain Sebastian Gunther during his court-martial to describe the events that happened at Turkey Springs. Gunther was the second in command for the soldiers who were pursuing the Northern Cheyenne on this journey. His commanding officer was Captain Joseph Rendelbrock, who was also court-martialed for his actions here and in other events along the trail. I'd love to talk more about both of those proceedings, but I simply don't have the time tonight. I tried to in my first draft, and I realized we don't have 4 hours to go through this. So, while the arrangement of the draws and ravines on the map look pretty much like any other set of draws and ravines in that part of the country, I'll show you an aerial picture here, and you'll see that you could take this map and if you're just working off of the draws and ravines, it could match any part of that country for 40 miles running. And so you would be out there looking for it for 145 years, which many people were. Maybe I overstated that a little bit. But what we did notice on this map is that there are 5 specific features that we would need to locate in order to have some certainty that we did, in fact, find the Turkey Springs battlefield. And those 5 features show up here. I'll start with the red dot on the upper right-hand side of the map. That is a red hill that all the soldiers describe riding past, both on the trip into the battlefield on September 13th, 1878, and then again as they ran for their lives away from the battlefield on September 14th, 1878. That blue line, as you can see, what Gunther wrote on there was their line of retreat. It was also their line of approach. And you'll notice that that blue line doesn't cross any of the ravines. So what that told us was that they stayed up on the ridges. They didn't go down and try to cross anything. And they didn't go down into any of the ravines. So we knew that we were looking up on the ridges in that part of the country. You see that second red dot near the center of the map, and the word knoll written sideways. We call that Rendelbrock's knoll, and that is the high point on the battlefield that the captains commandeered so that they could control what was going on, or at least see what was going on around the battlefield. And the pink line down below it you'll see the word ravine written alongside of that. That is a ravine where Captain Rendelbrock had all of the horses and mules stored. He had them tucked there to get them out of the line of fire and keep them safe. And then the final yellow line there indicates a line of battle. And we knew that we would be able to see 4 of those geographic features with our naked eyes. The yellow line of battle, if we could find the other 4, we knew that we would need to be doing some metal detecting to get in there and try to pull out any evidence that there was a battle that took place there, shell casings and that type of thing. So again, in addition to this map, we used aerial satellite imagery. We reviewed an incredible amount of national, state, and local historical records. Dr. Decker is an expert at finding just the right homesteader record with just the right information in it that gives us its position in relation to the battlefield. That helped us a great deal to kind of triangulate our way in to our first discovery. As I mentioned, it took us 4 years to travel about 7 miles before things started to click. But once they started to click, things went pretty fast after that. We found the Red Hill, and this is what the soldiers described as they came in and out of the battlefield. They came in on the right side of it. Back in there, the picture's a little fuzzy to me. I don't know if you can see it well. But on the right side, there's a cedar break back in there that they came up on that side, then crossed over to the left, got up on a ridge. And this is a picture of that ridge. And you can see the Red Hill on the horizon there on the left. They came around that and moved along this ridge. We found the knoll. This is Rendelbrock's Knoll. And one of the things that really cemented it for me was that the location where I'm standing, as I take this picture, I turned immediately to my right, took another picture, and there's the horse ravine, just right below Rendelbrock's Knoll. So we had those 4 features that we knew we needed to start looking for that line of battle. And so we moved to the next logical position for where that line of battle should be, started doing our metal detecting, and sure enough, we came across nearly 30 full shell casings and fragments of shell casings, and that told us we were onto something. So we were very excited, of course, and knew that we needed to take this to another level. So I knew we needed to start bringing in people who could help us document things properly. We reached out and contacted the Oklahoma SHPO, the State Historical Preservation Office, and shared what we had discovered so far with its director, Christina Wyckoff. She was very excited and was quite willing to help. In fact, she joined us on our next trip out. That's her in the blue hat, overlooking the digging that's taking place. This is just off the crown of Rendelbrock's Knoll. I want to point out the woman on the left in the yellow vest taking a picture of the events there. Her name is Rebecca Hawkins. When I contacted Christina Wyckoff, she gave us a list of archaeological contractors that were certified to work in the state of Oklahoma. And I didn't get very far down the list. It's alphabetic, and I came across the name Algonquin Consultants. And for those of you who are aware, the Cheyenne language is an Algonquin-based language. And I figured there's got to be something here. So I gave a call, and sure enough, Rebecca is not Northern Cheyenne, but she is of Shawnee heritage. It didn't take long into the phone call before she told me that she and her husband over 25 years ago had adopted 2 Northern Cheyenne children, and that this project was so near and dear to her heart that she would provide the services of her organization gratis, without any charge, and she has done so to this date. And we've done a lot of work. I cannot say enough about her and her company. I'll show you a great picture of one of her employees here in just a little bit at another battlefield, Cody. We call him the GOAT because he climbs anywhere. He climbs anything. So I need to move on here. What we found in that hole was this shell casing. And this is the nail that gave us every assurance that we had the right spot. This is a 4570 shell casing with a head stamp on it. Now, the military didn't start putting head stamps on their shells until 1877. There's information on this that helps us to understand a lot about this shell. The C at the top tells us that it's a carbine rifle, for a carbine shell for a rifle. And the F if you can see it there at the bottom, tells us that it was manufactured at the Frankfurt Arsenal in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The 3 on the left and the 7-8 on the right tell us that it was manufactured in March of 1878, 6 months prior to the Battle of Turkey Springs that took place in September of 1878. I can tell you that there were no altercations of any kind, military or otherwise, up in that part of the country in that 6-month period. And this was the last conflict between U.S. military forces and Native Americans of any kind in the state of Oklahoma. So there is no other reason for this shell casing to be in that hole, on that knoll, in that location, other than the Battle of Turkey Springs. Needless to say, we were very excited. I'm not a dancer, but I did dance. So we applied for recognition as a National Historic Landmark, and this spring both Oklahoma and the Department of the Interior accepted, and it is now registered as a National Historic Landmark. I am not an archaeologist, but I've been led on a good road, and I've met a lot of good people who have made this possible, and I am forever grateful for the opportunity to walk this path with these people who are so dedicated. That was a good day, but I'll tell you an even better day was when last fall I was able to bring members of the Northern Cheyenne Cultural Commission down to visit the battlefield. The man on the left in the blue cap is Mark Roundstone. He is a head man for the Bowstring Society of the Northern Cheyenne. That's his wife, Tammy, on the left, and she was just thrilled to be there, as you can see. She was just a joy on that day. The man on the right in the red and white headband is Wallace Bearchum. Little Wolf and Morning Star were what we call in the tribe old man chiefs, peace chiefs. They were the spiritual leaders, if you will, the wise men of the tribe who lead us in difficult times. Wallace is an old man chief currently. He is also a direct descendant of Chief Little Wolf. Those are his children on either side of him. When I look at this picture, you can hear it here. I cannot tell you what it means to me to be able to say I stood there with these people in this place. I didn't know when I decided to pick up a pen and start writing that I would be able to experience something like this. I show you this picture not only for who's in it, but where they're located. They are standing where Little Wolf had positioned the women and children, the majority of the body of the Northern Cheyenne who were traveling north. The soldiers could see it as soon as they topped that knoll. That is that knoll that they topped, and they could see the Cheyenne across the distance on this hillside here. Little Wolf had set this stage so that as soon as they topped that hill, they could see the Cheyenne and they would move in their direction. I'm going to show you in this next image, and this is that picture I promised you of the ravines. You could take that map and put it on any corner of this map and say, well, that looks like it could be the place. That looks like it could be the place. I'll show you where, if you remember the five elements. And it starts with the Red Hill. It's located right there. Now I'm going to pull up some of the narrative from Captain Gunther's testimony during his court-martial. I will read the testimony. If you will just watch the screen, I will present how the Battle of Turkey Springs went down, which is something that until this discovery, nobody really knew exactly what happened. So what Gunther said, as soon as we got over a very high knoll, which is the Red Hill, over the broken country, we could see the Indians in that gold oval. about a mile the other side of the ridge. We approached to within a half mile of them. When we were in between two canyons, after we got in, we found ourselves surrounded by the Indians. This is my favorite graphic of this picture. This shows two things. The experience of Chief Little Wolf and the experience of Captain Joseph Rendelbrock. Little Wolf staged this. You can see those purple fingers are just waiting to grab down on this body of 80 soldiers, should the soldiers decide to attack. Rendelbrock, with his experience, rode into that and stopped. He could tell that if he went any further, we had another Fetterman massacre on our hands where 80 soldiers were wiped out. This is where I chuckle, because Rendelbrock was court-martialed, driven out of the Army for his actions at this site. The court-martial was brought by a young lieutenant, Lieutenant Abram Woods. And the irony of it all is that when Rendelbrock stopped, he sent out an Arapaho scout to parley with the Cheyenne. And the Cheyenne told them, no, we aren't going back with you. Oh, I want to finish one more detail here, if I can. So they were already lying in the canyons waiting for them, although a majority of the Indians showed themselves a quarter mile further up on rising ground, and that is that red circle. So that parley took place between that red circle and where that blue line stops. And once the parley was over and the message came back to the soldiers that the Cheyenne were not going back to the agency with them, young Lieutenant Woods saw the Cheyenne in the ravines to the north and got nervous. And he ordered the company that he was in charge of, G Company, to open fire. I find it very ironic that Woods was the one that brought the court-martial charges against Captain Rendelbrock when Captain Rendelbrock was trying to save their neck. And it was Woods that opened the ball. So this is the stage, again, as it was set. Here is Rendelbrock's Knoll. Just below it is the Horse Ravine. And here's something that gets me excited. This is where we found all of the shell casings, the line of battle. What happened is once the fighting started, all the Cheyenne that were on that little rise there opened fire. And we found shell casings, of course, scattered around elsewhere, but this image right here tells a new history of what actually happened at the Battle of Turkey Springs. And it shows in, I think, pretty good detail the events that went down. What happened next was the soldiers were pinned down for 24 hours. They didn't have enough water. The water they had was bad. They were running out of ammunition. That night, Rendelbrock knew that he needed to leave the theater, and so he set up a plan for the next morning where a small squad created a diversion, and Rendelbrock and the rest of the company skedaddled out and ran another 4 or 5 miles before they found water, good water, and a defensible position over the hill. So 5 Northern Cheyenne were wounded here, including a small girl who had her ankle shattered by a stray bullet. The military had several wounded and 3 soldiers killed. Although the Northern Cheyenne were able to get through the first battle without anyone being killed, that changed when they traveled into Kansas, where there were at least 9 documented Northern Cheyenne deaths, with a possibility of 2 or 3 others that I've yet been able to document. The first Northern Cheyenne killed on this journey, noted by the larger X that just appeared in the green circle, was a man named Black Beaver. Little Wolf was aware that they would have access to large herds of cattle and fresh horses at all the ranches that had sprung up in the country north of the Cimarron there, or Bull River, as the Northern Cheyenne called it, and just south of Dodge City. So he sent his men out raiding the ranches. This was the cattle trails had just started up in '74, so this was 4 years after that. There were ranches that had popped up around there. Longhorn cattle were all across the range. And the Cheyenne spread out and started raiding horses. And Black Beaver was riding with 2 other Northern Cheyenne men, and they had found some horses that they were trying to steal. Ranch hands caught them in the act and started firing on them. Black Beaver was shot and killed, fell from his horse, and his 2 companions were able to get away without being killed themselves. The ranch hands returned, threw a rope around Black Beaver's body, drug him back to their ranch headquarters, which was called the Driscoll Ranch. It was on, at that time it was called Duck Creek. Today it's called Day Creek. They were showing Black Beaver's body off there at the ranch. Soldiers came and they showed it off to the soldiers until finally the ranch manager told him, you better get rid of that body. If the Northern Cheyenne come back and find him here, there's going to be trouble. So they drug him north from the ranch about a quarter mile and buried him in a shallow grave. This story has been verified in several different ways. Little Wolf told the story and gave a name to the man when he was interviewed by George Bird Grinnell in the Fighting Cheyenne and other publications by Grinnell. There was a man named J.E. George who was part of the ranch hands, one of the ranch hands that was involved in the shooting. He gave his first-hand account to a journalist at that time. The story was written up, and it's been placed in several other publications since that time. And you can read his story about it. The military reports corroborate it. And this man, I won't give his last name because he's a landowner, but his first name is Gary. He's a good friend. And I found Gary, actually, through the help of another man I had been introduced to. All along this journey, I was telling this to Shannon earlier and others, it seems like when I get to a turning point and I make that turn, the perfect person is standing in the perfect spot at the perfect time. Kim Goodnight was one of those people. Kim is a descendant of Colonel Charlie Goodnight. If you've ever read the book or seen the movie Lonesome Dove, it's loosely based on Kim's great-great-grandfather's story. Kim was born and raised in this country. I call him my landman. He knows everybody. He knows every creek, every draw. And he introduced me to Gary and several others, one of whom I'll show you here in a bit. But when I met Gary, he told me, he said, I've been told a story about an Indian grave on my property over by these trees. And he said, I don't know anything else about it. It's just supposed to be an Indian grave. I said, well, let's go over and take a look. And I said, I can tell you what I think I know about the grave. And so we started over, and he pointed it out to me. I want to double back real quick. Kim Goodnight recently retired, but he was employed by a company called ITC Great Plains. They're a power transmission company. ITC Great Plains has made it their mission to not only transmit energy, but to make sure that those people who live or are connected to the land that they pass through are respected and taken care of. And Kim went back to ITC Great Plains, told them what we were doing, and ITC Great Plains has stepped up over a number of 3 years now and provided us funding to help further our research. Part of that research involved doing some ground penetrating radar. And we hired a contractor. He came out, and this is one of the panels. Ground penetrating radar is kind of like a CAT scan. It does it in layers, and this is the most productive layer that the contractor pointed out to us. As you can see, there are 4 orange arrows there. There are other locations that I've got marked out there. They told me when they did this work, they said, we will never be able to tell you there's a grave here. What we can tell you is there are anomalies in the soil sufficient enough to indicate a disturbance the size of approximately a human grave. And these are them. And after we got a look at this, I continued my conversation with them, and they said, we have more sensitive equipment that now that we have these places located, that we can come and really drill down on these and give a much better picture of what might be there. And if you remember Rebecca Hawkins with Algonquin Consultants, I was talking with her about this, and she said, Gerry, I can do you one better. She said, I know a gal who handles search dogs. In fact, one of her dogs was recognized, this is 2023, recognized as the top search dog in the nation by the American Kennel Club. And I can put you in touch with her and see what we can get going. And that is how I had the good fortune to meet Jennifer Jordan Hall and Pocket. And this is Pocket having a conversation with Jennifer, and what Pocket is telling Jennifer is, he's right here. I'm laying on top of him. And Jennifer thanked Pocket very, very excitedly, and put Pocket away and brought out another dog named Wick, a 2-year-old that she had been training, and Wick keyed on exactly the same spot. And it was at that point that Jennifer turned to me and she says, Gerry, I can tell you with 100% certainty there are human remains right there in that spot. So based on all the other research and these 2 tests that we ran, we are 100% convinced that we found the gravesite of black beaver, the first Northern Cheyenne killed on the journey north. That trip that we came down with the Northern Cheyenne Cultural Commission, my brother Vincent was one of those that was with us on this site. They performed a traveling ceremony that released black beaver spirit so that he can travel and catch up with his relatives. And we marked the grave, and there's a prayer cloth, small prayer cloth, you can see tied in the branch of the tree. There's one more puzzle piece to this story that speaks to the relevance of our work, also serves as an example of how we as Northern Cheyenne people are so intimately tied to this story. Mari Sandoz traveled to the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. This is where it gets good. In the 1940s to do research for her book. Now I know that she was looking to gather the names of all the family members and how they, were connected so she could tell the story right in her book, do it in a respectful way. But what she left us with was an amazing genealogy that we were able to tap into. And she has a list of everyone who was on that journey north, those who were killed on the journey, those who were killed at Fort Robinson, and black beaver, of course, was one of them. That's what the red circle around that asterisk indicates, is that he was killed on the way up. We know from earlier census material that taken at Darlington that black beaver had 2 young daughters. Through Mari's work, we're able to find out he had an older daughter, Mrs. Wolfvoice, who was 19 years old in 1878. The thing is, and I was confused about this for a while, we couldn't find, as soon as I saw Mrs. Wolfvoice, I knew something was up. Wolfvoice was a noted scout at the Fort Keogh at Fort Keogh in the late 1870s. In fact, this is a picture of Wolf Voice, and that's his wife, Elk Woman, Black Beaver's daughter. I was floored to find this. This was taken in 1877, shortly after they had surrendered there. So Wolf Voice is a very historical name on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. Their anglicized names are Frank and Clara Wolf Voice. They had several children. Their oldest son was a man named Grover Wolf Voice. And Grover was a noted flute player in the early days of the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. People still tell stories about Grover Wolf Voice. Grover had a grandson named Lee Lone Bear. Lee Lone Bear was my uncle. He married my father's sister, Nita. Even more importantly, Lee and Nita, my Aunt Nita, had two children, Kevin, who has traveled on to the next camp, and Melissa Lone Bear. And I had the honor to be able to meet with Lisa early this spring. She sits as a councilwoman on the Northern Cheyenne Tribal Council, and tell her I found the grave of your great-great-great-grandfather, a person she knew nothing about until Mari Sandoz helped us connect these dots. This is, again, this just blows me away that we are able to do this kind of work with the help of so many people in this room, and Mari herself. It's common when one hears the term Indian grave to think of something akin to an Egyptian mummy, a piece of history that's so very distant from us in both time and geography. I'd like to invite you all now to think of Black Beaver and Elk Woman and Grover Wolf Voice, Lee Lone Bear, and my cousin Melissa, and recognize the very human connection that they all share to the remote concept of an Indian grave, a connection that you now share with them. Hold that in your heart as close as I do. Pressing forward on the trail, this last fall we were very fortunate to discover another battlefield that has become a casualty of fragmented and forgotten historical record. It is called the Wall Fight Battle, and this is a picture of its location near Meade, Kansas. Finding it was another case of piecing together scattered bits of history that give us part but not all of the story. One of those pieces was again provided to us by the research of Mari Sandoz. This is a map that she had drawn on, a topo map she had drawn on that I found at the Love Library in Lincoln. And she used it to track the military activity in this part of the country. The zigzag line moving from top to bottom on this map shows the route taken south by the troops under a Captain Morse from Fort Dodge. They were directed to meet up with Captain Rendelbrock's command. The triangle at the bottom shows a series of camps and engagements that occurred between September 21st through the 23rd. After they joined up with Rendelbrock, the straighter, and these events took place. The straighter line on the left shows the path they took, trailing the Cheyenne out of that part of the country after the engagements. The wall fight took place on September 22nd, 1878, and you'll note on this blown up portion of the map that Mari locates it on the left tip of the triangle. Now, I'm not sure why she selected that location, but I've looked it over and it doesn't jive with the military records. Actually, though, this map helped us to get into the area, and when we were in the area, we came across a landowner that had in her possession an article that was written about the battle, in the 1920s. And it was that article that gave us the location of the actual battle site. And I've located that with this blue circle. It's downstream. And we know that we found the actual battle site because it's producing. These are some of, just a couple of the items that were pulled out of there. Another 45-70 shell casing. On this site, we were able to find incoming, the lead. This is Cheyenne, Northern Cheyenne incoming. We know from the story of the battle and the placement of this lead that it was coming from the Northern Cheyenne rifle fire. On that picture on the right, you see that woman on her knees there. She had just dug that lead slug out of the ground. She is the landowner. And I wish I had panned my camera up because she is grinning from ear to ear. She is just so tickled to be on this adventure with us. About our second or third day in, she came to me and asked very quietly, "Would you mind if my sister joined us on this?" And I told her, it's your land. Come on. She had no idea this was on her property, that this was on property that her family had owned for so long. I believe her father knew because Alan Boy wrote the book, Holding Stone Hands, and he mentions her father, and that he gave permission to actually, my friend Kim Goodnight's father, Don, permission to take a couple Northern Cheyenne to that property, but the gate was locked and they couldn't get their vehicles in there. So the two Northern Cheyenne, one of them I know I grew up with, Andy Suktas, walked out down the ridge and looked down in the canyons and came back. So, Don passed, and so did Janet's father. And this history was that close to being lost. This is a picture in the middle of Cody, the goat. He's standing on top of a 90-foot cliff, swinging that metal detector like he's walking a puppy or something. If you can see, that's my shadow down at the bottom, leaning over, and I'm shouting, "Get off the cliff, Cody." Algonquin Consultants has done just an amazing job for us. We're going back down there next week to finish out our survey. So moving up the trail, we come to the more well-known battle sites. This is the marker on the left at the Punished Women's Fork battle site just north of Scott City, Kansas. On the right is the obelisk that was built to honor the settlers that were killed at Oberlin, Kansas. I'll touch on work we're doing at Fort Robinson in just a moment here. First, I just wanted to, there we go, show this picture, which these are some of the sites along this trail that I've had the pleasure to travel over for these last several years. The Northern Cheyenne, in 2002, the National Park Service had a white paper written by experts in the field to identify trails associated with U.S. and Army Indian campaigns in the Trans-Mississippi West for potential consideration as a National Historic Trail. The top two candidates identified in this paper were the Bozeman Trail and the Northern Cheyenne Homecoming Trail. I'd like to note that they identify the Northern Cheyenne Homecoming Trail as the Northern Cheyenne Exodus Trail in this paper, but they also recognize the Northern Cheyenne preference for having it identified as something to do with Northern Cheyenne Homecoming. I had a friend and relative, Steve Brady, who started that process, and I picked it up 10 years after Steve traveled to the next camp. We feel our efforts along the southern portion of this trail will help us in our overall effort to help the trail attain this recognition. We are also planning for a trail long 150th or sesquicentennial, that's a new word for me, commemoration in 2028. That will be the 150th anniversary of my ancestors' homecoming. And we do most certainly welcome any allies who are interested in participating in that effort. Moving on up to the trail, I'll finish my presentation with a discussion of some important work being done at Fort Robinson by the Northern Cheyenne Journey Home Committee, which I'm a member of, and my relatives there. And we have so many other relatives who are involved in this. We met over the last couple days, and we're out on this trail doing our work. We've been working on this for several years. I'll tell a little bit more about the history of it in just a bit here. But so here we step away from the Northern Cheyenne Homecoming Trail and step into a project called the Northern Cheyenne Healing Trail. It is certainly part of the overall Homecoming Trail, but is a separate project in and of itself. Somewhere near the confluence of the North and Platte rivers, half the Northern Cheyenne party went with Little Wolf and wintered in the Sandhills, while those that went with Morning Star were captured and taken to Fort Robinson. There they were imprisoned in an empty cavalry barracks. The story of what happened next is as complex as it is powerful. Efforts have been made at the fort to tell this story, though through the use of Nebraska state historical markers. A couple years back, I co-authored a paper with Kurt, Dr. Kinbacher, and a Dr. Jeffrey Moore at Nebraska Wesleyan. It was published in the Great Plains Quarterly. The title was Bias on the Byways, an Indigenous Analysis of Nebraska State Historical Markers. In this paper, we explored how unconscious or implicit bias affects how indigenous history is conveyed in Nebraska state historical markers. We were quick to point out in the paper that this unconscious bias is certainly not a product of the storyteller's explicit intent to diminish anyone. It is rather a product of how poorly indigenous peoples were perceived and understood, or more often misunderstood in earlier times, and how that misunderstanding has been sustained through various media over the years and still appears in today's storytelling. The signage at Fort Robinson, as well-meaning as it is, clearly reflects this unconscious bias. Many Northern Cheyenne deal with their own bias, it's important to point out, about this story. It's not unusual to hear elders especially express their reluctance to visit the fort, having been told over the years that it is a dark place full of grief and sorrow. This wounding cannot be ignored. Cross-cultural healing is clearly needed. The Northern Cheyenne Healing Trail, help me, Vincent, Nastanomeo, is an ongoing tribally recognized effort to design and build a 3.5-mile long interpretive trail that tells the story of the Northern Cheyenne breakout from the Northern Cheyenne perspective. Our goal is to foster a better understanding of not only what happened during the breakout, but also why it happened. We believe that this broader understanding is a vital first step toward the cross-cultural healing that is so badly needed and that we hope to encourage. This image and several of those that follow are conceptual drawings from the Mass Design Group, an architectural firm we've partnered with to help design and build the trail. Telling what happened involves describing the events that led up to the breakout and sharing how things unfolded during the breakout by telling the stories of different individuals involved in it. We also intend to incorporate elements of Northern Cheyenne culture like language, ceremony, leadership structure, botany, and education to help explain why our ancestors chose the drastic course of action they did. These elements were what wove them into this land, and why, for them, leaving here again would tear them from the very fabric that their lives were part of. They loved this land, the wildlife, the seasons, and the way of life they had learned here. And the way of life they had learned from those who came before them and who were now buried in the hills around them, slowly returning to the soil they had all come from. All of this embodied who they were as a people. This is why they would risk doing what they did. Whether they lived or whether they died, they were determined to remain part of this place. They were not from this place, they were part of this place. One of our main priorities, as critical as healing our spirits, is to heal the land. As an example, we intend to repurpose this old railroad bed and use it as our pathway toward healing. And by healing, we mean healing for all who have felt the pain of what happened here. Many of our children don't understand the heroism of their own ancestors, and they look outside their own culture. It's true that there are heroes everywhere, but when you have heroes in your own family that you can learn the stories of and take pride in, it can change the path you choose to walk in this world. Changing the narrative of what happened here from a story of tragedy to one of heroism and healing goes a long way toward helping one choose that better path. This trail will provide a variety of opportunities and settings to change that narrative. Families and kinship are also what tied our ancestors here and to each other, telling trail visitors how these important bonds function both then and now, still today, will serve to provide a critical understanding of the level of love, compassion, and humanity that enriches all our lives. By reclaiming our ancestors' stories, we also help them reclaim their humanity. This image depicts what we call the women's reflection point, one of 4 points of rest and reflection along the trail. We will include a discussion of traditional tribal leadership structure, but also recognize Northern Cheyenne perseverance and the ability to adapt when necessary. These characteristics of perseverance and resilience tie in well with those that I began this talk with, courage and tenacity. It is the purpose of this trail to raise these characteristics up, along with so many others that were displayed along this remarkable and historic journey home. Today, the end of the trail is marked by a monument that was dedicated in 2016. The story of this effort began when 2 of our elder women, Rosie Eaglefeathers and Edna Seminole, Vincent's mother, made their first trip to Fort Robinson in 2001 and decided on that very first trip that we needed to tell our own story here. They have both traveled on to the next camp, but we persevere, honoring their wishes and their memory, just as we honor the wishes and memory of those who ran for their lives here on that cold January night. These are 2 separate projects that I've introduced you to tonight. They are related through the heroic story of our ancestors, but each is singular in its focus to achieve separate project goals. But they do share 2 important overall goals. One is to honor our ancestors, those who made this incredible journey and who risked so much that we might keep our homeland. But just as important, we also do it to educate and inspire those who they did it for, all the generations that followed them. Because of our ancestors, we are still here in our homeland, and our ancestors' stories live on through us. It's time that we start telling them ourselves. Niaish, thank you. Nahane. Done.
Three quick announcements, and then I'll open the floor for questions with Gerry. I'll circulate the mic. There are cookies. Please have some on your way out. September 17th, 2026 is the next Pilster lecture. It will be Peter A. Kopp, who is an agrarian historian who talks about, well, food and crops and other things dear to our hearts. And finally, in the back by Lori, there are copies of Gerry's award-winning book. He'd be glad to sign one for you on your way out. With that, does anyone have any questions they would like to ask Gerry?
So Gerry, I just wondered, As you looked at that first battle site and figured it all out, did the captain of that militia take a quarter of his men to hold the horses down in the ravine?
Say again, please. I'm sorry.
Did he take a quarter of his men to hold
Yes.
those? Okay, so every four horses was held by one man. So he instantly took a quarter of his
Correct.
cavalry away.
Which is standard cavalry practice. They call them the fours. The man who grabs the other three horses plus his own and holds them while the other three fight. Yep. I'd like to say that we also worked with Bob Ray, who is a military historian. He's the one that told me about that when I first started working. Tremendous body of knowledge held by that man. Yeah.
Was that property private property too? Was that property private property also?
It is. We're very, very fortunate to have such wonderful relations with all three sites, private property owners, and then with the fort out there, and their willingness. Like I say, we're turning a corner here in how we tell Native American history. And Native Americans are taking the lead in that, and we have so many amazing allies to help us with that.
Is there an updated mapping of these locations where you're looking compared to the new maps and everything now?
We have our working material. At this time, this stuff is so new that there have been no official changes to maps. And actually, at this point, with the work that we're doing, we do want to try to keep some of it on the down low so that we can get in and finish the work that we started. We intended to have a prescribed burn down at the Turkey Springs site this fall. It didn't work out. The grass there is tall prairie grass. It's up here. I've got a picture of me with the grass up to my ears, and it's so dense that it's so hard to get the metal detectors in there. We were going to have a prescribed burn, but it didn't work out between the state agencies and the landowner. And so we're going to have that next spring. We'll be down there this fall, next week, doing what we can down there. There are different portions of the battlefield that we will be able to get into without that burn. And then we'll have the burn next spring and get in there and hope to find some good material. There is also rumor of, well, not rumor, there were 2 soldiers buried on the site. We have found no official records of them being exhumed. We know that there are headstones at the, I believe it's at the Fort Reno graveyard, but they might just be ceremonial. The soldiers were lost when they got here. That's why the Turkey Springs battlefield was lost in the first place. They had a map called a Ruffner map, and they looked at it and they thought, well, we must be somewhere near Turkey Springs. And the map was not quite drawn to scale and a little off. And then to top it off, the names of the creeks changed over the years and things got turned around. What they thought was Turkey Springs was actually about 8 miles away, 8 to 10 miles away. And so they were lost. So they may not have known how to get back up to where the soldiers were. So when we have the prescribed burn, we're going to bring the dogs back out and give Pocket another run at finding some history.
Thanks, Gerry, so much. That was an awesome presentation. I'm sure my students got a lot out of it, and I certainly did. I wanted to ask, these sites that you were investigating, I don't imagine there's a lot of photographs of them more than 50 or 100 years old. Do you have a sense of how much the geography has changed in 150 years, whether growth of trees or burns or agriculture, that kind of thing?
The aerial map that I used was from 1935. It's one of the earlier images that we have. There has been an infestation of yellow cedar, I believe it's called, down there that has just clogged up a lot of those ravines. There was a big fire that went through, I think in 2016, that cleared a lot of those out. And the ravine, the horse ravine, was involved in that fire. So fortunately, a lot of those trees are burned out, but we still have the snags, the the stumps and whatnot remaining there that we need to also get out of the way. Otherwise, we'd just get a mower and run down there and mow it out, but we can't do that.
When was the Cheyenne outbreak as compared to the Battle of Ash Hollow?
I need a...
The Battle of Ash Hollow, when was that as compared to the Cheyenne outbreak? How far, what time frame were those two apart? You know? Do you know?
The Battle of Ash Hollow compared with the Cheyenne? Okay, give me. So yeah, I'm not sure of. I think Ash Hollow was back in the 1860s, was it not? 1873. Okay.
Time for one more question. Oh, hi. Last question.
Have you spent any time with Angie Taylor? Her mom and dad, one was Cheyenne, one was Sioux, and her great-grandmother was the little girl that I think went to Pine Ridge, if I remember correctly.
Okay. First, I am really having trouble, and I apologize. I got my hearing aids in. Kurt, could you repeat the question?
So Angie Taylor in Crawford. Angie.
In Crawford? Oh, yes. Yeah. Angie. Oh. Thank you. Yeah, Angie was at our meetings the last couple of days. She hoped to be here tonight, but we got a message that her friend Moni was ill and wasn't able to bring her here. But yeah, Angie knew our parents growing up. She spent a lot of time on the Northern Cheyenne Reservation. The first time I saw her, I had these images of my own mother, and I can't tell you how much that moved me. She's an integral part of this effort. Absolutely. Yeah, let Major answer. This is my brother Major. He's not a real major. He just likes to act like one, but...
I am real. We've been working with Angie for the past probably 15 years, 24 years. She was at her meeting just a few days ago, and she's a wealth of knowledge. She's been able to share a lot with us. She used to live in Lame Deer and knew our mother as well. And so she's kind of a adopted mother to us, and really has encouraged us and actually scolded us and said, get it done, get this trail done. Yeah. She's very adamant about that. Yeah, I do have a question, though, because with all of your archaeological skills and amazing experience of finding these battle sites and everything.
I'm afraid where this is going.
Can you help Vincent find his cell phone? 'Cause he lost it about a month ago. We can show you the location, but we're not quite sure.
I can't, but maybe I can get the dogs on it. We'll find it. Vincent.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have one better on you and the dogs. The sacred woman in our tribe can find bodies, and that's what we used at Fort Robinson. They can feel them, and they pray, and they know where they are, and they won't go back over there. So anyway, Shahila comes from the Sioux, and that Cheyenne, our real names is Sista and Sadaya. And when we first met the Sioux at Bear Lodge, that's Devil's Tower, just north of there, we were painted red. And so they called us Shahila, which is the red painted people. And that stuck. Cheyenne stuck after that. Good job.
Nice. Thank you.